Great. Excellent. All right. Are we recording now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, for making time in your schedules to come and hear these two wonderfully prolific writers and experts of matters of sex, love, and intimacy in relationships. And Marla has sort of laid out the guidelines for you that we're going to be working with on Zoom. So just remember that this will be recorded. And one thing I want to add is that our participants, for our participants, is that both Marla and Kim are offering a 20% discount off of the retail price of their books, which you can purchase on their websites. And I'll post those links in the chat session several times throughout the discussion. Okay. So tonight, like I said, we're going to hear from a couple of very bright writers, Marla Stewart and Kim Green, and listen to their insights on issues of intimacy and relationship dynamics. Now, most people in the world want solid, satisfying relationships in our lives, and we want good, satisfying sex, and we want emotional bonding in our relationships. We want to feel close to our partners, connected to our beloved, and to be seen and accepted fully for who we are. But good relationships, they don't just happen magically or develop on autopilot. They require good communication, commitment, attentiveness, and effort on our part. And Marla and Kim are going to address some of these and other issues of relationship, intimacy, and communication. So let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll kind of jump into a discussion. Marla Stewart is a research sexologist specializing in matters of sex, love, and intimacy in relationships, and also a clinical coach and sex educator. She is also an activist, an entrepreneur, and recently a new mother. And the title of her book, for which she'll be drawing on tonight, is called The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay: Techniques and Strategies for Mind-Blowing Sex. And our second author, Kim Green, has written 3 books, one of which is a New York Times best-selling autobiography of the American Idol winner Fantasia Barrino, of which Kim was the ghostwriter. In addition to being a ghostwriter, Kim has also worked as a journalist and is currently coaching writers to help them realize their dreams of becoming a published author also. And her most recent book is a romance novel that delves into Black LGBTQ relationships called Vicissitudes. So welcome, Marla and Kim. We're so happy to have you with us tonight. So I thought what we might start out with is a little bit of an icebreaker discussion, why you decided to write your books. And I think it would be great if we could just tell us, sort of what prompted you to write your book on sex, love, and romance, and, what you want your readers to get from it. And I think we're also kind of curious about what kind of feedback you've gotten so far from readers. So I'll turn the floor to you.
Marla? Oh, I was like, go ahead, Kim.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My book, Vicissitudes, is a book that I wrote because I wanted to write something that gives African-American women, basically, an opportunity to explore something that is very not normal, not regular for their experience, possibly. So I just wanted to write a book from the place of what if. What if this happened to you? What if you had a relationship with somebody that you're quote unquote not supposed to, or that society doesn't condone? What do you do? Do you work from your heart, or do you work from the societal limitations that have been presented? So I really wanted to create this atmosphere of questioning for readers to question themselves. How do they deal with meeting into something that's going to be a great experience, possibly? And are we open or are we afraid? And so that's kind of what my book questions. What if you fall in love with someone that you weren't supposed to, quote unquote? So that's what my book is about.
Yeah, so good. And my book is just some advice. So Jess and I bring our own sexual theories, sexual seduction theories around, sexuality. So mine is the seduction learning style. It's something that I have been teaching since I started my business 11 years ago. And from those sexual theories, and her theories are around the core erotic feelings, or elevated erotic feelings. So how you want to feel when you're having sex. And so we basically, like, when our powers combine, right, we combine those theories, and then we actually give actionable, actionable things to do, right? Sex skills. So we say, like, hey, if you want to learn how to kiss, you want to learn how to dirty talk, you want to learn how to do all of these different things, these are some really good ways to do that thing, based off of our sexual theories that are, that prompt the beginning. So and yeah, we really I really wanted the readers to get that, anybody can experience, anybody can be seductive, doesn't matter who you are, whatever kind of person you think a seductive person is, you are that person. And we another reason why, or what I wanted people to get out of it, is that just like this is for everybody. So that's why our language is gender neutral. We really are very adamant on, like, anybody can experience any of these things. It's not just like women experience this and men experience this, or whomever, you know what I mean? So we didn't want to fall into that binary thinking. We really wanted to expand how we really felt. And and I think as queer people ourselves, we just really wanted to see ourselves reflected in the book as well. So that is sort of what prompted us.
And another thing that I would say about you and I being together having this conversation is because my book presents a couple that is struggling with how to be intimate because of their body differences and some of the issues that they're having. So what's so funny about it is I read Marla's book and I was like, oh my God, my character Morgan should read this book. She needs it for this relationship that she's in. So it's really perfect because the very issues that are being presented as fictional characters are obviously things that are happening in everybody's life. And it's really helpful because this is an LGBT conversation, a transitional conversation. One of the characters has a physical problem. The other one is in transition. So it's like those characters are mentioned. Those ideas are mentioned in Marla's book. So her book is really, truly is for everyone. And that's what I love about it. So I just want to say it's a great foundational book for anybody seeking intimacy.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed your book as well too. I'm like, I know we're gonna get down to the nitty gritty and stuff in here, but I just want to say it's one of those main questions of falling in love with someone who you kind of don't want to fall in love with is a prompt that I teach my students in my intro to women's and gender studies classes and in their in my gender and sexuality class. So yeah, I'm glad you really sort of brought that to light. Yeah. Anyway, I know we're going to that.
Good.
And I'll just chime in, just say, as a professor, I could see how both of your books can be taught in various kinds of courses in academia in different ways. So let's get into some of the more deeper issues that I think that where you all particularly overlap or share commonalities. And I think our audience too can relate to some of this, particularly around, let's start with self-image and body image and intimacy. Both of you delve into some very important issues around self-image and intimacy in your books. And it's clear from your success as writers that you're tapping into a need that many people in the world are feeling when it comes to sex and love. So, let's get into some of those here. And I think a typically common one is self-image and how we feel about our bodies, which can come up at any point in our lives or relationships. In the initial dating phase, I know people can feel sometimes self-conscious. I certainly have, about being naked for the first time in front of a lover. Worry about whether you're sexy enough for your partner. There's fears of rejection that come up sometimes. But I also think that body image and self-image issues come up in seasoned relationships too, and that have been solid for many years, because our bodies are also changing constantly. You know, they change because we're aging. Bodies can change because of illness or disability, and these things can affect our self-image and how much intimacy we can have with our partners. Sometimes we can even hold ourselves back. So for someone who's struggling with self-image, body image, to the point that it's preventing them from intimacy and openness, and you know, what advice do you have for them, and you know, how do you address this in your books?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to give the scenario of my book so that you can tell what my poor characters could do. But so in my book, one character is in transition. So he's a male going into transitioning into a male, and he is self-conscious about it because he's with a heterosexual woman for the first time, really loving her, and is afraid for the intimacy to happen because he has not had bottom surgery yet. And for the Morgan, my female character, she has lupus. So she has a lot of skin issues, a lot of all of these things that are making her self-conscious about her body. So she is not even worrying about his thing, she's worrying about her thing. And there's a scene that really talks about that. And what I am so proud of is that another reader that I was in an interview with, she had cancer. And so she said that when she read that part of my book, that she cried because it was so true, how you feel so self-conscious about your body and you feel like you just are not desirable. So I think that was moving to me, that I had touched something, a nerve in somebody else who understands that feeling of insecurity. But now Marla will tell us what we should do.
So, you know, body image, it's interesting. You know, I am self-conscious about my belly, right? And my belly, I've always been a big belly. I've always had a big belly. When I'm a size 8 or I'm a size of 20, my belly is always there. Somebody is always asking if I'm pregnant. So it doesn't really matter, right? So Tristan, you're like, oh my God. So for me, really having to develop the kind of confidence that I had, I really had to reshape my brain, reframe things, re-anchor things. And so in our book, The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, I put that exercise in there because I was like, people need this. Whether it's for sexual confidence or whether it's for body confidence, you need to build up that confidence sometimes. Because like Tristan said, our bodies go through so much as we age, now that I just had a baby, my belly is even bigger. You know what I mean? So it's like, I've got to figure out a way to navigate something that I don't like about my body. We all have something we don't like. I mean, to think that we love everything about our bodies would be absolutely ridiculous, right? But we can change our brains of how we feel about it, right? So for me, whenever I feel self-conscious or I'm like, oh, my big old belly, you know, I have to turn it into a positive. So one of the things we say is, hey, what is that negative thing that you feel about yourself? What's that negative thing? Okay, well, I don't like my belly. My belly, it makes me, you know, when I see it, drives me a little nuts, right? And then you go, okay, well, what is the positive thing about my belly? And most of the time when we have something negative about ourselves, we say, what's the positive thing? There is nothing positive. This thing, you know, like there's nothing good about this thing, but actually there is. With every negative thing that we have, there's always going to be something positive. It just might be harder to identify, right? And so one of the ways that we have to sit with ourselves and we have to think through it. Well, my belly is a wonderful pillow. You know, my lovers love my belly. You know, they think my belly is fine. They like to rub it. They kiss on it. I mean, it's a part of my body. So, you know, that's the positive thing. It's a nice pillow. It's a nice pillow for my baby too. You know what I mean? So we really have to, and we have to catch ourselves in those negative thoughts and turn them into positive. And then we do that through the affirmation style. So, you know, I have a beautiful, you know, pillow in the middle of my body that seems to accommodate everyone. And that's okay. So again, it's just sort of the way we think about things. So yeah, in the book, in Kim's book, you know, if we were to have that exercise, or if the characters were to have that exercise, they could say, well, what's good about having lupus, right? And and I would love to hear people's responses. What is good about that thing? Tell me, what do you think is positive about that? Or Kim, I don't know if you could.
Well, I can talk about that.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I am a person who has lupus, and so I think what has always been the gift of lupus for me is that it made me slow down. So it's a lifestyle change. I had to slow down. I had to sleep better. I had to eat better. I had to be aware of what I was eating and how I was eating. So I think that has always been the overall gift of lupus. And because I then obeyed, I did a lot of reading of Louise Hay, by the way, when I was diagnosed. So You Can Heal Your Body. And so, you know, they say that lupus is a disease of not being honest and not being true to yourself. So I think that conversation was always in my mind when I first was diagnosed. And so I kind of changed my life a lot. You know, I got out of my marriage, I moved out of where I was, I did all kinds of things to just kind of honor myself. And that is how it's worked. So you're right, you always have to go for what's the gift of it. And the other thing that I was going to say about my book is that when Morgan and John get in this moment of this intimacy thing and see each other naked for the first time, I think the big powerful thing about that scene is that she accepts him. And I think that is a big part of your book too. It talks just a lot about accepting not only your own self, but accepting the other person, no matter where they are in their journey of their bodies, whether the transitional thing, which is sort of literal, or just, your own decision. I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to gain weight, whatever you decide, your partner has to just accept you. And I think if we all kind of can get to that place, some of these relationships would go a lot better. I think we go into the relationships with this premeditated idea, what I want a person who looks like this. And that stops us from getting all the good stuff that person might have for you.
Absolutely.
Those are some wonderful responses. Certainly a lot of food for thought there. I had never thought about turning a negative and something that's considered negative into a positive, and that definitely requires also an assessment, quite a bit of work mentally. It's you don't just sort of will that to happen. It's a process. I think when it's riddled with emotion and mental digging sometimes within ourselves. And related, I think, to this question that I want to ask, or to this topic I want to ask about what your advice is for people, particularly living today, and we're constantly inundated with images of ideal beauty and desirability, and even to the point way far more than when I was growing up as a kid, and because of technology. And there was a study that was released recently that Facebook has known for quite some time, having run studies, that there's a negative correlation between there's a positive correlation between the images that they put out on that are pumped out on social media in their platforms, and mental health problems and suicidality among particularly young girls. And so I just wonder if particularly for women, I think men are also affected deeply as well, but I think we don't really have that conversation in our society. We don't have that discourse that recognizes that. So particularly around women and girls, I'm just wondering if you could speak to that in terms of the impact of social media on our self-image and self-esteem, and how we might, how people might deal with that.
Do you want to go, Kim?
You can go first.
Okay. So Besides turn your social media off, I mean,
That was probably my big part.
everybody
Yeah.
here is like, we found you on social media. What are you talking about? So I think like, part of it is, mitigating the social media, right? Like, who are you following? If you're following, big booties and small waists and, big titty people all the time, and that is because you want that ideal body. I mean, that's going to harm a lot of your self-image if you don't have that body, right?
Or
So
your
I think,
expectation of what your partner will look like or
oh
should
yeah,
look like. Yeah.
absolutely. So I think, probably unfollowing those people, following people who are doing more, body positive stuff, or more people who look like you and who you think look gorgeous as hell. You know what I mean? So like having that kind of navigating your own social media of who you're following, who you're not following. And I am a big proponent of sports. As an athlete, I think there is a lot to be said about how people how they navigate their self-esteem and how that takes form as an adult. And it really mitigates that negative criticism. Now, of course, we're still subject to it, but I think we're able to see it in a kind of a different light. I'm not sure, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because we see all types of bodies in athletics, and we see them as graceful or powerful, and so that might be part of it. I'm not really sure. But so if I teach women in sports at Clayton State. So, even seeing those different types of, as a woman, seeing these different types of women, I think you're able just to wrap your head around it a little bit better. But if you're not an athlete, or if you don't have that kind of background, I think really being able to understand and critically look at what you're seeing. Is it from a male gaze, which is most of our media? How do we navigate something that is, we use a lot of things, we use sex to sell a lot of things. And I think it's just making sure you take a critical eye to it and say, what is this telling me? What is this showing me? Is that okay? Is it not okay? What is, that kind of thing.
And I would say that I think that so too much is focused on the outside. And I think it's just so important that people, like she said, like mitigate the social media, first of all, and TV. I mean, all of it, all of the media that we're seeing is selling things and everybody has to look a certain way. But I also, so much of what's important is inside. And so, I mean, it's sort of a societal choice or personal choice to focus on what's inside. And I think that helps us do the work, the necessary work to be stronger and more confident as people. So you lose your confidence if you are comparing yourself to the big booty girl or the, whatever that's their ideas, then you lose yourself in all of that searching and looking at other external things. So it's really so much about going inside, I think. I mean, I just think that is so important, and we're missing that, all of us as a society at this period, we're just missing going inside. And that's why, everything is astir, as they say. So, yeah, I think it's just about important to go inside.
I like that.
Excellent. Great. I as an athlete myself, I just wanted to that really resonated, I think, with me, Marla, been an athlete all my life. And I think one of the things I sort of heard or sort of thinking about when you were talking about sports is that when you participate in sports, whether you're a kid or, adolescent or an adult, you experience your body engaged in a competency. and you experience joy, because that's what sports is. Sports is fun, and so it's a very different way of experiencing and being in your body, and assessing your body's value from within, rather than from the perspective of the media or the fashion industry, or what, from these images that sort of come to us from, you know, from all over. So thank you guys. That definitely, I think, resonated with people in our audience as well. Since we're talking about intimacy, I want to zero in a little bit on issues of communication, and about particularly around communicating about sex. And there are some wonderful points of overlap between both of your books, that around that. And so I'm going to is this the one? I'm going to describe a scene from Kim's book, and then sort of talk a little bit about a couple of quotes from Marla's book that struck me. And so there's a pivotal scene in your book, Kim, in Vicissitudes, where the two main characters, there are a number of characters, are engaged in relationships at different stages, but John and Morgan are about to get intimate with each other, and but then John does something unwittingly that turns Morgan off and dampens the mood, which I'll let you disclose more if you want to say about in a second. But Morgan is taken aback by his actions, and John in turn gets defensive, which is something that Marla addresses in her book when she writes, and I'm going to quote Marla here: "If your lover becomes defensive when you make a request, offer reassurance that your requests do not reflect a deficit, but are an indication of your love and commitment and attraction." And then there's another quote, Marla, that just nails it, and I just have to I have to say this here. Marla says, writes, quote, "The fact is that sex means different things to different people, and it's up to you to determine what sex means for you." And that's very much seems what's going on. One of the things that's going on with Morgan and John. And so I'd like you both to weigh in a little further and elaborate on what you want readers to take from your words and from that scene.
Well, I would love to talk about that scene because it was a really, it's a bit of a complex situation. So John is in transition. He hasn't had bottom surgery yet. So I'm sort of giving it away, but you have to read the book anyway. But what's important about that is that his feeling of how to make love to a woman, he already has that figured out, how he thinks it needs to be done, but it's not necessarily just for her, it's for him. He can't feel comfortable unless he straps on and has all of these things to make him feel like a man. But Morgan just loves him the way he is. She already knows that he has not had bottom surgery yet. And so she was very offended by him bringing all of these accoutrements to the bedroom, because she felt like, I thought we were connecting. But his thing as a trans man in the middle of transition is, I can't even be the man I want to be in bed unless I have this apparatus on me, which is a really, it was just so complex because I understand him so well. I understand why that makes sense. But at the same time, there was no consent. He never said to her, this is how I will do it when we get to this stage. So when he presented all this, she was just very horrified because she had a background with having toys in the bedroom with her ex, who was a man. And so it's just a really interesting complexity about consensuality and talking. And this is a conversation they should have had. And then he realizes that when it all goes wrong. And then he says, oh, I should have asked you. I should have talked to you about this is my plans, I'm sorry. But of course that was a breakthrough and it brings them even closer. So it's all good news at the end. But I think it's a very complicated conversation, sexuality, and not only who we quote unquote were born to be, but who we see ourselves as. So he can't see himself as a man unless he has apparatus. He can't see it. But she already is in love with him head over heels and never thinks apparatus. She just loves his spirit, who he is, how he cares for her. So I think there's so many different places that we love, and we don't even realize the gift we are being to each other, because we're so worried about the external. So that's all I'll say about that. So Marla, tell us, school us on it. What it should have happened.
You had me going down memory lane, Kim. Okay, here we go. So when thinking about like what sex is, right? Because sex is different to different people. And I think what you were talking about in particular, when Morgan has been with cis men, I think it makes a sort of the assumptions of what is sex, right? Especially between cis het people. It's sort of and for those folks who are not familiar with cis, what I mean is cisgender. So you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, and then het is heterosexual. So I think there's a whole different communication and language with cis het people. And I think we have to realize this, like, this is not, there's different kinds of communication with queer people, and there's different kinds of communication with cis het people, and that's okay. And they're different, you know what I mean? And sometimes I think people don't understand that. And so when sex means different things, different people, I remember coming out, at 16, and one of my best friends going, well, wait, you have sex with a woman? Well, what is that? How? There's no penis, and it was like, wait, what? Like, sex doesn't necessarily mean that there's a penis always involved. You know what I mean? So that's not sex to me. Sex to me is, A, B, C, D, whatever, right? And so I think really understanding what sex is to you and having that conversation, I think is super, super important. I have to tell this story because it's just like in my head, and it reminds me totally of like sort of like that scene you described. I went on a date with this trans man. This is back when I was in San Francisco. I went on a date with this trans man, and everything was wonderful. We had a great time. And it came down to the sex because I like to have sex, and he wanted to have sex. We were on the same page. And I was like, okay, so how are we navigating this? What, let me know how do you want your body to be referred to? What is it like? Let's talk about it. And we had the conversation. Everything was cool. And then, so there was a moment where, like, in the middle of sex, he's like, okay, I'm ready to put my dick on. And I'm like, go get your dick, right? Gets the dick, and oh my God, like, he pulls out the biggest dick I've ever seen in my life. Like, what? Like, I had to be like, no, boo. You need to go ahead and change that up. I hope you have a backup, because that is not going in here. So and he was like, no, and I was like, no, like, absolutely not. And so he went and luckily had another smaller size, but I was just like, what? Like, it was just mind-boggling to me. But again, we didn't have that conversation of like, hey, this needs to be like, I can't, that is just too big. So communication is important, as always. But what's really cool is that, like, he didn't take offense to it. You know what I mean? He was just kind of like, he's like, oh, okay, all right, which made me happy. And it was good, because it was an indication of like, hey, I care about you enough to say, no, this isn't going to work. And you care about me enough to go like, okay, I'm gonna change it. Like, we're cool. Like, and so that was a really amazing for me. So just understand, like, when you're having that communication, being defensive isn't going to help. And so what else we talk about in the book is having that positive reinforcement. Like, so, like, oh, I love the sex that we're having, but we can't have sex with that. Maybe sex with this would be better. You know what I mean? And really understanding, like, I like you as a person, and here's the really great thing I like about you, in hopes that you can mitigate some of that defensiveness that might happen, because some people, might get defensive, and just now that's the point of stating, like, I love you, and this is why I think this way, or whatever. Like, I'm trying to show you how we can make our lives better. So yeah, I had to tell that story. It was just in my head.
Well, I love the story. That's a great story.
That's a great story. That's a great story. Hilarious. And I'm glad it worked out okay.
Yeah.
As you're sort of telling the story and talking about communication, Marla, and some of the things that Kim was talking about a little earlier about how much Morgan loves him and how she sees him, and she cares for him and really connects with him on a spiritual level, and the way he cares for her, it got me to thinking about also, particularly when you told that story, Kim, and how you communicate, with someone. So it's not all negative. You sort of frame it in a very complex way. So this is great, and let's try this and switch it up a little bit more. It made me think of in the way Morgan loves John, and the way she sees him as a man, and it reminded me, when you were telling that story, Marla, that Kim goes through. This is one of the things I really love about the points of view are very much points of view anchored in the points of views of characters, so Kim really tells it from a multi-perspective. She tells you the story from a multi-perspective.
So good.
Panoptic, yeah. And so what I wanted to add to what Kim was saying about Morgan is, she loves him as a man because of the way he cares for her, and she connects with his spirit. And what I want to add to that is that because in the book, Kim, you spend a great amount of time actually talking about John's male body and his masculinity, his physical masculinity, from the perspective of Morgan. She does love his physical manliness and his masculinity. You spend a lot of time talking about his beard and his body and the things that Morgan's very much attracted to. And so it's, certainly a penis doesn't make a man, but there's a whole lot more that goes into making a man, including a lot more physicality as well, that can be eroticized and valued and appreciated and conveyed in a situation like that. So that I wanted to just highlight that. I love the way you all are riffing off of each other, because I'm learning. It's taking me to another level of my own thinking processes as well. Okay, so I want to say something else, since we're sort of talking about bodies. Let's delve into something around a theme of non-normative bodies. And I think both of you do a wonderful job of inclusivity in your books and attending to the experiences of non-normative bodies. By non-normative bodies, I mean bodies and people who are not white, people who are working class, differently able, queer, trans, fat, what have you, people who don't fit that sort of mainstream ideal of moneyed, middle class, metrosexual, got all the money to spend, So Marla, you have a nice quote in your book that actually caught me up by surprise when I read it, because I had a completely different viewpoint before. And so you write, and I'm going to quote you here, if you are a person of color, queer, kinky, consensually non-monogamous, a person with a disability, older and or fat, your experiences with sex and relationships are even more likely to be acknowledged and celebrated in popular media, end quote. Now, I had no idea.
Less likely. So it's supposed to be less likely.
Oh, less likely. Oh, okay. Okay. Then okay. So I'm one and well, so here's the thing too, it's interesting in Vicissitudes, and this is one of the many reasons I loved Kim's book, is that Kim includes a lot of non-normative bodies in characters in the book, and they are she integrates them and interweaves them in the novel, in the story, in a way that puts them front and center, makes them relevant, doesn't sort of tragedize their disability or their non-normativity, but doesn't tokenize it either, and so it's just life. This is life. It's filled with the world with different sexual orientations. In fact, the book starts out with a lesbian wedding, and what could be more normalizing of non-normativity than to just open the book with a wedding. So it's, I really love how you included those bodies in there. And so I wonder if you all could speak more about that, about the importance of having, non-normative bodies in our representations, and how you think about and talk about that in your books as well.
Well, I will talk about that because first of all, at the wedding scene when the book opens, Morgan is there. She's, has lupus, and so she has like bad legs and feet, and so she's like trying to be cute in these high heel shoes, and she's like hobbling around with her feet. But it's not a tragedy. It's just her reality. It's like, here I am at a wedding, and also she hasn't eaten in a long time because she was getting ready for the wedding. So she starts to wilt, as she calls it. And so that's another thing, that's just her life. That's how her life is. And then, Renee, another character, is the one who's getting married. She also has lupus, and she talks about how her body has dwindled and how she's very skinny because of having lupus and, all the medicine and all those things. And then there's another character in the book who is in a wheelchair, a child who's in a wheelchair. But what's great about it is she's at the beach and she's with her mother, but her mother, she's got this fancy wheelchair, but the mother just takes her into the ocean because the little girl loves the ocean. So she's not stopped by the wheelchair, and her mother doesn't see her as disabled. She's like, this is my girl, and we go in the ocean because that's what she likes. So it's never really talked about. And at one point, Renee asks Morgan, like, what's up with the wheelchair? And she says, I didn't ask because the mother presented her daughter, like, wheel her into the ocean. And I think what I really wanted to sort of showcase about that is that these are the realities. This is what we see on the street. This is real life. And we never see these things in books. It's like, how do you handle it? Do I have to do the research about what disease she might have? But I didn't do that. And I'm a big researcher, so I could have been up all night finding a disease for her. But what I wanted to show is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what disease she has. What matters is she loves the ocean, and her mom is wheeling her right in, because that's how we all like normalize each other as human beings. So I think I loved the fact that Tristan pulled that out of the book. He's really talked about that a lot, because I think we all want to see ourselves as perfect. We need to see ourselves as perfect, no matter how imperfect we are. And that is very much the journey that I took writing John and struggling with all of his insecurities and trying to endow his manhood into him. And Morgan was doing that high speed because it was so important that he reign as a man and is able to really see himself that way. And so this is true for everybody in my book, because my belief is that we're all in transition. We're all trying to be something that, coming from where we are to who we think we are. And I think that is what makes the book a global message, because I want us to see that we're all in transition no matter what it is. So I think that's what I was getting at there.
That's beautiful. I really love that. Like we are all in transition. Our bodies are always in transition. That's beautiful. I like that a lot. yeah, when it's rare when we see ourselves on TV. I mean, me, I'm like all those things. I mean, except for like disabled. Like, so it's like, I mean, seeing myself on TV, how many characters can you name who are black, queer, kinky, fat, non-monogamous? Like how many are there?
I don't
I do.
think it. We want you on TV now. Well, that's what we're working on, so we can get it. We
It's
need to
super
get it.
rare. It's super rare. It's just like I remember watching The Shy, and I remember being like, "Oh my God, what?" Like, like seeing characters that I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh my God, I can actually relate to these characters." I don't see myself on Modern Family. I don't see myself, on any show really. And so when I do see myself, kind of myself, it's or somebody who has like some of my identities, I'm like, oh, holy shit, like this is amazing. Um, but it's really, it's like Kim said, we all want to see ourselves somewhere. And so that's
Mhm.
why I really loved your book, because it was just like, I see myself in this book, right? Like I
Mhm.
see myself and I'm like, I remember that. Or or like I can really picture it. Um, and I just think it's really, really important that, like you said, we all want to see ourselves somewhere. And uh, so yeah, I would love to see the inclusivity even more so, you know.
Well, and I want to say something other that when I first started, right, my first book, Hallucination, also it's a much more about Morgan and having lupus. But I remember one of the editors that I worked with, well, this is many, many years ago, but her critique was, it's beautifully written, blah, blah, blah. And I think we should take some of the sick stuff out. And I thought that was so interesting. And I was like, I'm keeping the sick stuff in because that is real. That's true. There are women everywhere. There are women with cancer who have one breast taken away. There's men with prostate issues who cannot have even erections at all. And those people are having sex, happy love. I mean, I have a client who has 3 kinds of cancer, and he is completely no erectile function at all. And I worked with him on a book that he wrote, and it's all about it's called Return to Sex and Love. And his
Mm.
book is all about this hot, sexy relationship he has with this much younger Hispanic, beautiful woman. And they have the greatest sex life ever, and it has no erectile function at all. And so I think we all can find it. It's there. It's all in us because all of that erotic stuff is inside. It's inside. And I think that is what I really wanted to express when I have all of these different kind of odd characters and odd bodies. They're all enough and they're all beautiful, and everybody is inside. That's what matters. So I think your book, again, gives us perfect instruction. I mean, you can go without legs, penis, anything, and have a great time reading this book here, because your book gives every ounce of information that you need for whatever situation you are in. And that is such a powerful message. So that's what I loved about your book, that it just makes it possible, and pleasure is possible for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's super important that we showcase that in our language. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like if we're thinking about like whenever I'm teaching something and I'm like, okay, if put one hand here, but I don't just say put one hand here. Like if you have one hand, put it here. If you have
Mm-hmm.
this, then you can use this. And
Mm.
if you don't have those things, let me know, because where I'm coming from a person who's non-disabled. I'm coming from this perspective, so I have a different worldview. But if you have something and you think there needs to be a modification, let me know. I will adjust it accordingly. But it's always about how you include people to understand, hey, this can include you too. But yeah, I think, yeah, super, super important that we, and I love that you're like, I am not taking the sick stuff out, because that's the, like you said, that's the reality. That's
Yeah.
people's realities, and people want to see themselves. Esther and my
And
wife
people
and
want to
I,
be
Esther and I,
comfortable, though.
you said what?
People want to be comfortable. So I
Yeah.
think people are uncomfortable. And that's why the editor was like, oh, take that out. People won't want it. It's like, they should want it because it's true. It's their reality. And I think, you know, we're all in this struggle with what's real and what's not real. And we are in a world that everything is not real on this social media and all this stuff. So we're like digging to find the truth. So that's
Yeah.
what I think. I do that a lot. I try to dig for the truth a lot. And when I write, because I just want us to come back down to earth a little
Yeah.
bit. That would
Yeah.
help.
No, I was just gonna say, like, Esther and I, we play this game around like commercials. We say like, oh, there's the lesbian, oh, there's the this, and oh, there's that, and oh, there, you know, it's like people are trying to find to do the inclusivity so much that you see it everywhere. And like, it's important, but we also, like, we got to point it out, because if we don't, like, then we don't see ourselves, right? You know, so yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
And I think I'm glad you said what you did, Marla, about the importance of inclusivity in our language is important, particularly in what you do, because not only do non-normative bodies not see ourselves represented in the mainstream, but even the highly specialized issues and topics, and particularly around sex and love, we don't see, or I don't anyway. I don't see very many movies or television programs or what have you, where non-normative bodies, whether that's trans or queer, disabled, are actually engaged in romance and love and sex. And so what you sort of walk away with, or what you can walk around in the world with, was this assumption that there's no joy and pleasure for those people, and oh, that's it. And then you can sort of tragedize them, and then of course that's a message that people are also who are non-norm, that's what they receive as well, because we're viewers and customers and consumers of images. And so I'm so thankful that you that conscious, and you build that level of awareness into your coaching and the work that you do with people, because that's an area in particular, right? To hook it back into sort of what we were talking about at the top of the hour, am I enough? Am I enough? Is how I'm showing up. Am I enough? Am I good enough? And I think that's one of the messages that's really important about the work, around inclusivity, and using language and making people feel comfortable and welcomed. And in having a book like Kim's, where people are just integrated in, the reality of their non-normative bodies is really integrated into just the world at large, and they're not tokens or tragedized in sort of way, but at the same time we're not going to skip over their non-normativity as if it doesn't matter, and we're just going to attack some people on for token reasons. So thank you both for being aware and conscious at that level. And it's one of the things I really picked up on Kim's book. I loved was a subtle way that she integrated that in. So, all right, I think what we'll do is we'll explore one more category. We're about at 5 o'clock. We want to give folks a little time to ask questions. I'm sure people have a lot of questions to ask, and so but this one seems, I think, is important, I think, to kind of address, and that's about kindling the fires of passion. And in your book, Marla, you write, and I'm going to quote you here again. This is just the quotes from me is the professor in me, so y'all just have to kind of deal with that. This is how I do stuff. So the quote is, since each person has a unique set of wants, needs, and limitations, which shift and evolve over time, every new lover and encounter presents a fresh course in seduction, affection, and pleasure. And end quote. And Kim, in your book, you have a couple, Renee and Bethany, who've been together for a while. And then you have the possibility that John and Morgan's budding romance might be a long-term relationship as well. So I'm sort of curious about what advice you would have for people who are in long-term committed relationships. How do you keep that passion and romance alive? How do you keep the fires kindling? Are there things that people can do to make their experiences, of seduction, affection, and pleasure continually refreshing and anew? In other words, how do we avoid burnout and bed death in our relationships?
Well, I'll just address it quickly about the characters, and then Marla is going to school us on what we should do. I think Renee and Bethany, because they're a long-term couple, and honestly, there's no big sex scene in the book with Renee and Bethany, and that's deliberate because they're really stable. They live in this fancy house. They have all this stuff. They have both very busy careers. But they're really close. They're very, very emotionally close. And I think that one thing I would say is that long-term relationships, and we all know this, they change. It's not as hot and sexy as it was in the beginning. And then, Morgan and John, as Bethany said, they reek of sex because whenever they're together, they just have to touch and touch and touch and kiss and do something. So I think that it's just true. That's another reality check with the characters that I created, that older couples don't have as much sex, but Marla's going to fix that. And then I think that John and Morgan, because they're new, and the thing about curiosity and sort of the unknown is what makes sex so sexy, I think, from my experience. That's what makes it so yummy. You don't know what you're going to get. And so to be with John, and he tells, discloses, and then we're going to go to the next scene where they actually are naked. Morgan is like, oh my God, this is such a new thing. Like, that expands me if I accept this. So I really want people to read Vicissitudes and look at how they can expand themselves by opening to different things that they were not expecting, because that is where the juiciness comes from, curiosity and expansion. So that's my thoughts, but please tell us what the old married couple needs to do.
But I was also thinking too, like Renee going through that tragedy, you know what I mean? It's sort of like right. that will help suppress a lot of intimacy. Right. When you're going through trauma or tragedy, that can do a doozy, and that's stressful. And so understanding that as well, I'm kind of like, I was looking forward to seeing if there was any sex scenes, but I was like, oh, there's no sex scenes. Okay. And so it's sort of like, oh, but nobody wants, like, y'all, going through a lot, right? They're going through a lot. Anyway, if you're not going through a lot, right? Yeah. There's less tragedy, there's less things going on. I think what's really super important is just to, number one, accept your lover as the way they are, right? Mm-hmm. But also, I'm gonna, of course, pitch my seduction learning styles, because sometimes those change over time. We might be, so it's either your visual, auditory, or tactile, right? By touch. And so understanding that type of what your learning style is, your seduction learning style, and understand how you get seduced, I think is super important. I remember I had a client who, 40 years married to this, to her husband. And she was like, every time I say something, I'm not getting through. I don't know what to do. And I literally was like, do A, B, and C and see what happens. The next week she was like, holy shit, that was amazing. You changed how we've been communicating. Like, for 40 years, I have not been heard. I did this one thing you tell me to do, and now he heard everything I said. And it's like, well, it's because you weren't communicating him in the way that he needed, and that's so, so important. And that's really important when it comes to seduction, or when we want to get laid, when we want to have sex and we want to get sexually involved with someone, we need to be able to communicate with them in a way, right? So it's not only like the brain and the spirit, but it's also how that dialogue is going. And so it is the what are we giving, so that we can get what we need. And so with that, the seduction learning styles, but also we need to try new things. Sometimes we get stuck in our ways, and we have sex the same way over and over and over and over again. I say bring up the list of erotic activities. So I made up this like erotic activities list. Just try this. Try erotic massage. Try cooking, try role play, try dressing up, try a video camera, try going to the sex club, try, having a date, try bringing in another person, try bringing, whatever it is, like try, like be curious about how your partner is going to react about something, and really come at it in a loving way, right? Again, not as the deficit, but really like, I want to learn, I want to see how you'd react, right? Like it's funny to me, like I remember Esther, she asked me, she's like, what if you saw me kissing someone else? I'd be like, I want to be front row. I want to see it. I think it would be so fascinating. Like, I would probably be turned on. I might even want to join. Like, I would love to see it. And she was just like, you're so weird. And, but I'm like, I'm going to be weird. That's who I am. You accepted me. You know who I am. So, but again, it's just like being curious and trying different is it a spanking? Do you want to get a little kinky? There's so many different sexual experiences we can have, but a lot of times people limit themselves to one or two things. So I think really opening up your world is going to help you navigate that to get that spice, or to get that something different. Because like you said, Kim, when you see something different or you want to explore something different, it's sort of like, ooh, you get that new relationship energy, or you get that like, ooh, let's go have sex in the back seat. Like, really? What if we get caught? What if we do? It's a little dangerous. Let's do it. Whatever. Like, navigating that, I think, is just trying to find different new things. And that sometimes means talking to your friends. Maybe what are your friends doing? What are, ask advice, go to sex educators, go to sex workshops, find your local people. Like, there's so many things that we can do. We just have to Google it, expand our horizons.
And the other thing that you said in your book, which is really great, you talked about being able to say no and having boundaries, and being able to say, the kids will survive if they're, eat fast food tonight, so that the parents have time to go out or whatever it's going to be. But it just was really about boundaries and prioritizing your romance and your relationship, which I think is such a sort of obvious fact, but also so intentional. And I think the intentionality of it is a little frightening. I think people are not ready for that. It's like, we should be having sex every single night, since like we did when we first met. And that's not reality, because you live together, you have bills, you have all this. And that's an interesting thing that is going to be looked at in the next book, because we don't know what Morgan and John are going to do. We kind of get a sense of what they're going to do, but we really want to see them really be in real-time relationship on the ground. And I think that's going to be a very important piece to this relationship, because I'm trying to show women that there's possibilities. So I have to kind of finish the conversation, because I want them to like go all the way. So we have to see what happens.
Yes. And I love that. So what's really great, so in the research, it shows that the folks who were in long-term relationships, their best in long-term relationship, or when they're happy, I should say, when they're happy in long-term relationships, it shows that number one, they prioritize sex, and that they're kind to one another, that they really give what they need to one another. And that's so important, because sometimes we can be selfish and we want to be like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But that ends up damaging our relationships. So it's super, super important that we prioritize sex, and that we're really sweet to one another, and that we can, provide for one another. That is the basis in keeping our relationship together.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is such great advice, and so eloquently to kind of bring those categories to the topics to a close. And I want to thank you both for just really reaching deep, and giving all that you have tonight to our audience. And I'm thrilled. This is just really well. And so I want to have give folks an opportunity, the audience, to ask questions. You guys have so much tonight, probably a book's worth. It's in and of itself. And so I want to open it up for, 15 minutes or so for people, 15, 20 minutes or for people to have an opportunity to bring their questions to you. And so I'll do that. Anybody's interested in directly question for Marla or Kim, or both? Oh, we got a hand raised.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So my name is Kadia. First of all, thank you so much for giving this talk tonight. I was super excited and super interested to take away all that y'all offer. So I recently graduated with a BFA in writing and was kind of looking into grad programs for sexology. So what qualities should I be looking for in like an effective grad program?
Mentor, that is going to be who you love and adore. I think one of the best ways that I got through graduate school was because I found a Black queer mentor that that really resonated with me in the realms of psychology and women's and gender studies. So finding a mentor that you adore and that you love their work. There's quite a few of us now that are out there at the, on the university level. So, it's good. And finding a program that will support who you are as a person. Unfortunately, I was in a program that I was all but dissertation. So I have a PhD education with no PhD because of some racist folks in my department. And so I think it's super, super important. I can't stress this enough, to not only find a great mentor, but to also make sure that department is supportive, and real supportive, not fake supportive. So that means finding other people who are also in the program that you feel that would, that you would feel that that are getting something out of it. You know what I mean? So that's my advice to you. But yeah.
Thank you.
Other folks got questions or comments? Didn't have to be questions, it could be comment, observation.
I have like another question if nobody's gonna go. Okay. Yeah, so like definitely gonna pick up both of your books. Was there any other text to like before I get into school to kind of supplement my learning?
Books?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. In addition to our books.
Yes.
I think look, all the books behind me are really good, but as far as sex books, are you looking for sex books?
Yeah, like more educational.
Come As You Are is a really great book.
Okay.
She Comes First is one of my favorite books. Girl Sex 101 is a really great book. The whole lesbian sex book is actually a really good book. Even lots of my straight friends are like, this book is amazing. Um, and this one's also a pretty good one. This is sort of a basic book. So Carnal Knowledge
Mhm.
is also a book. Sex Education You Didn't Get in School.
Okay.
So I think that's also a really great book as well. But yeah, if you email me, I could. Those are like start with those. How about that?
Okay. For sure.
And then come see me again.
All right. Sounds good.
Julie seems to have a question. Tristan, do you see that?
Julie,
Yeah.
go ahead, Julie. Can
Are you
you there,
muted?
Julie?
Oh, any tips for unlearning sex shame? So I just wish sex ed looked more like this growing up. Any tips for unlearning sex shame?
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Kim, or do you want to?
Well, anything I say is going to be controversial, but I think that where does the shame come from? First of all, I think, it's often learned. It's religious sometimes. People have always portrayed it as something dirty. And so I think that is a job for the individual to kind of unlearn some of that and really make peace with what sex really is, which is connection. Sex is connection, it's love, it's generosity of your body, which is your temple. So I think it has a lot of deeper meanings, and we've not been taught those things. So we've just been taught either it's just for procreation to make babies, which is why everybody is so homophobic, because they're so afraid that we're not going to procreate. There's a million kids that are not even being um, taken care of. So I think we should stop worrying about procreation and whether we're making enough children. We have made plenty that we're not taking care of. And also, we're having relationships and marrying people that we don't want to marry just because we're told that we should. So the job is to kind of undo all of that learning that I'm 32, I should be married. And I just met Pete on the bus and he seems nice and I'm going to go ahead and marry him. That's a mess. We got to stop it. I mean, the shame, we have to be ashamed of who we're being in this idea of sex and love. And I think when you're really getting into your own sexuality, you get to discover what's real for you. And then there is no shame when you love a certain person, no matter who it is, trans, not trans, gay, queer, whoever it is. The love is what you're working on. So to me, it's just framing, getting out of the shame and putting it into a love conversation. That's what my advice.
Yeah, my advice too around unlearning sex shame is really number one, therapy. Going into therapy, really seeking that out, talking through it, really understanding why you're feeling that shame. And then, like Kim said, listening to your body and understanding that joy. What is the joy saying to you when you do that thing that you're supposed to be shameful about?
Mhm.
Right? Why are you denying your own joy? Might be the case too. And so again, I think therapy can help unlock a lot of those things that we keep in our brains, or those that stigma, or those scripts that we keep in there um, to guard ourselves, or to really hinder and inhibit our sexuality.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to follow up on that, to piggyback on that question. Where does sex shaming, where is that picked up at? I mean, I can understand it's a religion, but it's got to be. I mean,
A lot of
and it's
times
an
it
honest.
could be
I really don't know. Like,
religion.
okay,
I would say a lot of times with religion, sex shame happens a lot. Um, and with religion, just how you were raised. For instance, if you were taught masturbating is bad, don't touch yourself, don't do that.
Wow.
That can really, as a child, can really hinder your sexual progress. If you were told, don't touch there, don't, it's down there, like it's disconnected from your body. That type of language can really hinder yeah, your sexuality, or you can feel shame about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Marjorie has a
And
good.
Mallory, yeah.
Oh, Mallory, yeah.
So following on the theme of shame, any advice to someone who considered themselves heterosexual and now might be bisexual? Where does one even start? Mallory, oh my gosh, I conduct groups for bisexual women, and a lot of times what tends, where do you start? Well, you can go to the website. There's lots of different websites that have gosh, I want to say it's like bisexuality.org, but I could be completely wrong. But there's a whole slew of like information of where about bisexuality. And then so I would start there first on that website, and then I would also go to different groups. So a lot of times when I come across people who feel like they might be bi or come around bisexuality, sometimes they're in like non-monogamous environments or like swinging environments, like so meeting up with folks who are also bisexual, going to Pride. There's always a little bisexual, group somewhere, they're hanging out all together. So Pride events, any kind of events, I think are good places to start. But for real, the website to just get some general information around bisexuality, because I think we just had like Bisexuality Visibility Day or something like that. There's so many sexual days, y'all. I can't keep track of them all, but finding the different resources there as well.
I want to add one other thing. When we were talking about the shame thing, I think there's actually, and for African American people, I think this is even more relevant. There's two kinds of problems. There's either the religiosity that it's like, no, 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 don't do it, don't touch, don't do it. And then there's also a lot of people who come from too much sex. They grow up with like as children, they see too much sex, it's precocious. They're over sexualized at a young age. They're, wearing promiscuous clothes when they're young, really young, like less than teenagers. You see all of these crazy things. And I think that also creates a shame, because when you get as an adult, then you're sort of afraid of it. You're kind of afraid, overwhelmed by it. And I think that is another piece of it. So there's a lot to unpack with one's past, whether it was too much or too little, or told not to do it, that it's negative. But I think coming to terms with those things are always important. So whether it was you grew up and, I grew up in a family that had all kinds of sexual stuff going on, and too young and too many problems, and mothers dating their children's boyfriends, and, just chaos. And so then I think that is also impacts the adult woman. They're either really afraid of just even getting involved in it at all, or they're they just can't connect. They just are unable to connect because they feel like whatever they do is going to create what they've seen when they were growing up. So we just have to be really honest with what we've seen and what we've heard, and then make your own decision. I think that's the big thing about like growing into yourself as a sexual being.
I think it's important too. I want to kind of butt heads with you a little bit around like the promiscuous clothing piece, or that piece of it, because I think that what we teach our kids, it can go either way. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Whether I've seen people who have been sexually assaulted as kids, molested as kids, and go into shame, don't do anything for the rest of their lives, or, can have sex, and be okay, so, or you have a lot of sex and be like, okay, this is actually not right. They can go in several different ways. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's something about a way somebody dresses or anything like that. But I do think it is the family values. I think someone else pointed out earlier about the family, familial trauma. I think that piece can do some serious damage. But yeah, I think because I dressed quote unquote like a hoochie when I was in high school. You know what I mean? And my mom, she just looked at me and would be like, "You're leaving the house like that?" And I'd be like, yes, I am. But she raised me to be a sexually responsible adult, young person. So she basically told me, when I'm ready to have sex, I go get condoms. This is what I need to do. So I think if you teach your children, or have somebody teach your children, that what it means to be sexually responsible, I think that is the key right there, whether they dress like a hoochie or not. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and I didn't say that to be judgmental. I was just talking about, I was just thinking about the fact that we live in a really toxic society, and there's a lot of people who are not communicating these values to their children. So young boys are, you got to think about, and I did a lot of thinking about this when writing this book. It's like, what is the words that are being taught to young men? Sleep with as many girls as you can. You got to fuck the whole block just to be legitimate, right? So we're sending our girls out into that. So it's not that, you're right, communication is the key. We have to be teaching our girls all those things that you were taught. But also the fathers, who's teaching the boys that you don't have to sleep with everybody on the block to be legitimate. And so I just worry, I'm like a motherly kind of person. And so I worry about our girls. I do. I just worry about us all the time. And so I worry about their being out there, because these boys don't see it. Oh, that's just an independent woman. They misconstrue it because they're not being taught the valuable lessons of how to conduct yourself as a young man. And which is another reason that John was such a gift to me to write him as a character, because his duality is what makes him so whole as a man, because he has the soft side and he has the male side. So do know that I was not being judgmental, but thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, it's all good. No, it's all good. It's good conversation. That's all.
And I wanted to chime in a little bit, unless someone else has a question. Do we have any other questions? And another from the audience, because we were getting a couple of them rolling. I just when Kim talked about race and shame, sex shaming, my mind went in the direction of how, as a race of people, our sexuality has been so severely distorted in this country, and going back to slavery, and it was precisely through the distortion of Black people's sexuality that we were that slavery was justified. We were dehumanized, quite literally dehumanized, and conceptually, in terms of citizenship. So we were no longer human because of somehow of our sexual practices or whatever, and then that becomes a justification for engaging in even more heinous sexual practices against Black people historically, and so I think, and I don't really have anything to sort of, I don't have an astute point to make the way that you all do have, but about this, but I can certainly see, I think that there, Black people, we need to unearth that history. We need to comb through that history of distortion, and then the trauma, the sexual trauma that has been used as a weapon against the race of Black people as a race, and especially when I'm thinking in particular lynching, which is a sexual power act, particularly the way white people practice it in the South, and also the correlative of that would be the rape of Black women, thousands, tens of thousands of Black women that was going on at this time. And something we seem as a culture not to want to have a conversation about. So I just think that, there's something about being subjected to that for hundreds of years, and never really truly having, I know as a race, we can't have therapy as an entire race, but there's work there that we need to do, conceptually, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and it may even have some genetic component, like some sort of passed down through DNA. I'm just not as versed in that kind of science, but what happens to an organism in its environment, it evolves over time and it passes on those changes. It takes quite some time to see those changes show up, but we didn't evolve out, like we were fish at some point, like the species here. So I think there's just so much there that we have been impacted by, that still affect us in the way that that we relate to our bodies and the way we relate to our sexuality. And so, yeah, again, like I said, I don't have an astute point, but when you said that about race and sexual trauma and sexual shame, that's what kind of popped into my head.
Yeah, there's a neuroscientist, Debelino Roy, out of Emory, who does that DNA stuff, and it is ingrained in our DNA. It gets passed on through our DNA. All of those that trauma does get passed in through our DNA. So it does take work, literally reworking your DNA to rid some of that ancestral trauma. So it's real. That is real. But it is up to us as individuals to try to mitigate and change the way we can so that our DNA changes, moving forward. Absolutely. Debelina Roy is the name of the woman who studies. Debelina. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm gonna find that. Okay. All right, how are we doing with folks? Any more observations or questions?
Yay for coming to yourself out as bisexual. I just want to say, because I feel like that's the first thing, you need to do, like, is come out to yourself, and then like, and even if you're just curious, and even if it doesn't pan out all the way, because I've had some friends who rode the ride and took the t-shirt back, you know what I mean? So I just give you props on understanding and moving through those feelings. So good stuff. I think that's with any of our identities. I think it's just good to evaluate them and keep asking ourselves, come back to it 5 years and keep asking it again, because you never know, it might change, and that's okay.
Yeah. I would just want to say one thing, that I really so appreciate the people who have come here tonight, and I so appreciate this conversation. And I hope that you will go on your social media and just say that you were here and that you enjoyed it, or share the transcript of it, because it's important. This is a conversation that's really important. Really, really, really important. And it was wonderful and fun to talk about it in the context of a fictional book and then this wonderful how-to manual. So it was like a really great collection of us coming together. But I just ask you, if you enjoyed it, please share it on your social media.
Yes, and pass on to your friends.
Yeah.
this will be posted up on various platforms and social media, so people will be able to access it as well. And I do think it's important, particularly to have two powerful, very bright Black women writers, prolific writers, and people who've really thought about this for a while to weigh in. And so I want to thank you, Marla and Kim, for just a wonderful program, and lively and engaging, just like I figured it would be. And I want to thank everybody, our audience, for coming and making time. It's been a great conversation, good stories, and I hope people got things from this that you can take back to your own.
Read the books. The books are really great, and they go together, because my poor characters are in this conundrum, and then Marla answers all the problems.
I think for the next book, for the next sequel, Kim, you can have them buy Marla's book.
Like they're all gonna, of course.
They can buy the book, right? And
of the relationship. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. I mean, because they're gonna have a rocky road, a little bit of a rock. You can't. Everything's not hunky dory. You got a little.
No. There's gonna be issues.
And so, yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much as well. I really appreciate it. Tristan, thank you so much for moderating, and I loved your questions. They were amazing. And Kim, brilliant. Your book is brilliant. You are brilliant. Thank you so much for the different perspectives, because actually I've never read a book like that before, and it was really impressive how you really captured the characters and their each individual thoughts and how they were, navigating this book. So I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So thank you. Yeah. Go get the book, y'all, if y'all haven't gotten the book. It's really good.
Thank you all.
All right, folks.
All right, y'all. Have a good night.
Marla, thank you for the tips.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Marla.
The tips.
You rock.